Hi everyone, welcome to ELI, the place where you get your daily dose of inspiration for entrepreneurship. And today we have with us Dr. Santanu Paul, who is the co-founder of TalentSprint, which is an edtech platform that operates high-end software bootcamps and premium deep tech programs. Hi, Dr. Santanu, welcome to ELI.
Hi, Priya. Lovely to be here.
I would request you to introduce yourself to our audience, please.
Sure. Thank you so much, Priya, for this opportunity. I congratulate ELI for such a lovely initiative, which I'm sure is doing great work in terms of promoting entrepreneurship and similar ideas in the field of business. And I'm sure college students and young professionals are loving this platform in terms of getting inspiration from many, many founders across the industry. So good job. Keep that up. Now, with regard to your question about my background, I am a computer scientist. I got my education in IIT Madras and BTech many years ago, and then after that I went to the US to study. Did my PhD in computer science from the University of Michigan, which is one of the top schools in the US. After that, I lived in the US for many years. I was a research scientist at IBM, TJ Watson Research Labs, which is a very famous research lab, the home of Deep Blue, the computer that beat Kasparov. I was at IBM Research at that time when that happened in 1997. After that, I drifted off to the world of entrepreneurship very quickly. In my late 20s, early 30s, I started a company called Viveka in the US, in Boston, that got acquired by a company called OpenPages. And then I became CTO of the parent company, OpenPages. So I had a lovely run in the US as a technologist and CTO. Mm-hmm. But then somewhere along, I would say 17, 18 years ago, I decided that, I'm not really cut out for a lifelong stay in the US. I decided to make the journey back home to India. And as luck would have it, I was blessed enough and fortunate enough to get an opportunity to set up an American software company in India. And many of you may have heard the company today. It's called Virtusa. So I was instrumental in setting up and scaling Virtusa in India in a significant manner. So when I came in 2003 to take over Virtusa India, it was about 300 people. When I left, it was well over 3,000 people in 6 years. Company had gone public in NASDAQ. I was chief delivery officer for the company. So fantastic run, 6 years in India, based out of Hyderabad in those days. So 2009, I started thinking again about, I don't want to be part of a big company anymore because Virtusa was quite big by then globally. And I was also beginning to kind of feel the need to do another entrepreneurship gig. And my learning in India in those days was that, there was a big need for EdTech. And we'll talk more about that. But that's how TalentSprint came about. And that's how we set up TalentSprint 13 years ago. And of course, the rest, as they say, is history. So that's the background.
Tell us a bit about TalentSprint in terms of what it is about, what is the scale of operations, and what all products or services that we are offering.
Sure. TalentSprint is an EdTech company, and today, of course, EdTech platforms need no introduction, and they are so popular. There's so many of them, and many of them are very well known. We focus on two very specific problems that are very important problems. One of them is that young college graduates in India, when they graduate from institutions, vast majority of Indian college graduates come from colleges which are not premium, right? So they don't come from an IIT or NIT. So, there is 95% of graduates come from relatively lesser known, smaller institutions, private institutions, may not be known globally also. When these students come to the market, it's hard for them to access outstanding professional opportunities. And one of the big factors, which I'm sure is no secret, is that today programming is the secret sauce. If you're a good programmer, if you have great coding skills, then you have great market value. So one of the things that we operate is coding bootcamps. So software coding bootcamps run by TalentSprint are now globally renowned. And I can tell you more about that if you have interest, but that's the first business we have, which is ensuring that young people in the 20, 21-year-olds, when they come out of college, they can present themselves to industry through TalentSprint, both by training and industry linkage. We make them really ready for a global market in terms of programming. So that's our first product or service. The second area we focus on is adjunct to that, where working professionals in the industry today also are in need of major upskilling. So earlier it used to be the case that if you got your first job and then you could just cruise and years of experience was enough for you to have a great career. But I think the world has changed, and today years of experience may not be an asset, may even be a liability. So today, continuous skilling, continuous professional learning is very important. And with the advent of deep tech programs like AI, machine learning, data science, blockchain, crypto, fintech, what have you. TalentSprint offers one of the most interesting catalog of such programs for online learning, which are highly appreciated and highly used by working professionals in the country today. Across technology sector, consulting sector, banking and finance, we have working professionals flocking to our programs in these deep tech areas because they want to upskill and reskill themselves and prepare for the jobs of the future. So those are two areas we focus on.
Okay. One of the key trends that we have been observing recently is there is a huge salary hike in the tech talent space. Especially the demand for Indian engineers is growing, and especially people who can code, they are in a lot of demand these days. So, can you tell us how is the industry changing in the similar space, and why this sort of trends is happening?
I think this idea that coding is a massively differentiated skill, I think, is not new. It's been around for the last 20, 25 years in India. What has become more polarized now is that the difference between somebody whose programming skill is X versus somebody whose skill is 5X, their compensation may be 25X different, not 5X different, right? In other words, the polarization has become very big. As you can imagine, for the last 10 years, we've been hearing about the arrival of new technologies and AI machine learning being one predominant one. And then post-pandemic, I think there has been a huge surge in digitalization across industries. Earlier, companies which did not think of themselves as tech companies now all think of tech companies, right? So they think like tech companies. So this whole idea that we talk about fintech, we don't talk about finance companies, we talk about fintech companies. We talk about health tech. We talk about med tech, we talk about ed tech, we talk about insure tech, we talk about environmental or green tech. What does it mean? It means that every sector which was earlier core sector has now become essentially a digital sector, which means technology is going to be the major disruptor in every industry. It already is. Even manufacturing now is digital manufacturing, right? So in other words, the future of a factory may not be workers in a factory. It may be people programming a factory which can automatically produce goods, right? So if you think of it in that way, essentially the most powerful skill of the 21st century is clearly becoming a hard skill, I would say, is clearly becoming either programming or analytical ability to, sort of program machines to do things. So therefore, it is not surprising that the confluence of digitalization, pandemic, arrival of deep tech, all of these subjects combined together is putting a high premium on jobs for people who have those skill sets. In fact, today just being a programmer may not be enough. You have to be a programmer who knows something about how to manipulate large data sets, or you have the way to define a machine learning algorithm which can learn from the data sets and actually take over the programming itself. So clearly, we are reaching a point where programming has become a higher order skill. And I only have to add one more point to that, and then we'll stop, is Metaverse. I mean, look at what's happening with the Metaverse. The gaming industry, augmented reality, virtual reality, all of this has been around, and now it's all convergence. All of this is coming together in the form of meeting the internet, where gaming and augmented reality, virtual reality intersects with the internet. You're going to have the Metaverse. And in the Metaverse, again, a whole set of new programming skills will be needed. So I think if you look at the trends of social media companies, technology companies, deep tech companies, big tech, all of them are heading towards more and more programming skills required to live in a world where technology determines largely, shapes our future and determines how our lives are led.
Speaking of skills, I think there are some skills that are going to become redundant in next 5 years or 10 years time frame. So, the young people who are preparing for the future, can you tell us what are those skills which are going to become redundant in next 5 to 10 years, and which young people should avoid learning in the current times?
Yeah, so I would say that the way technology is advancing, a lot of things get redundant very, very fast. I'll give you an example, right? Up until 3, 4 years ago, software testing was a great career. Today, test automation has reached a level of sophistication where humans are not required for testing jobs, right? So if I was, for example, try to become a software professional, software testing would have been a great career to choose 10 years ago, 5 years ago. It's no longer such a career. But let me focus more on, let me spin your question around and say, what are things you should learn actually? What is going to make you highly valuable in the job market? And I don't want to use the word like employability. I think those are too low a statement. We shouldn't set such a low bar, we should set a high bar. What makes you a great professional? I think there are 2, 3 different things we have to really embrace as young professionals. First, as I think we're talking about, that if you have the ability to program systems, program machines, you can build that skill set computing or computational thinking, as we call it, right? If you have a computational thinking mindset, you don't have to become a programmer. I'm not saying become a Java programmer or a Python programmer, even though that certainly is very, very useful and a very advantageous skill in the job market. The most important thing is that be a computational thinker, right? Figure out how to solve problems using computation, how to use computers and machines and algorithms and software to solve problems. I think the approaching problems from a computational thinking perspective is very important. The second thing I would say is that the purpose of education is not to learn a bunch of facts and figures. Purpose of education is to build your ability to be problem solvers. So problem solving is a mindset and a skill set. In other words, given a problem, do you have the ability to approach the problem and start to break it up into manageable, simpler problems? And how do you decompose a large, complex situation to smaller problems that you can break down further? And then you can solve those problems at a small level and reassemble a solution, right? This problem solving skills is a very important pillar. So if I was to put the three pillars, I would say problem solving skills, computational thinking, and third, I think is very important, I would say, is some element of this ability to work in teams, right? Unfortunately, the education system rewards us for being, lone rangers, solo performers. We all want to be brilliant students, right? But reality is that today, all complex things that are happening in the world that are interesting, that are high value, even an enterprise, if you want to be an entrepreneur, your first and foremost responsibility is to assemble a great team of people who can complement each other and work as a team. So I would say that the hard skill of computational thinking and problem solving combined with the soft skill of being able to work in a collective set of smart people who may not agree with you on everything, whose skill sets may differ from you, their background may differ from you, they may come from a different culture. All of those diversities you can embrace, and then you can solve problems with that collective. I think those are three skills I would greatly, encourage people to acquire very, very fast. And the fourth piece I'll add to it, which I think is an emerging theme, where a lot of the Western cultures are very good at this, but Indians are not. And you see a element of that now is design thinking,
Mhm.
which means that the ability to look at a problem, not just solve the problem, but solve it in a very elegant manner, right? We know the difference between a solution and an elegant solution. You can see that in our lives. I mean, a lot of things in life that we look at. I mean, why does an iPhone command such a premium compared to other phones? It is because of that elegance in the solution. I mean, a smartphone can be a smartphone, but it has to have that feel of attractiveness that people want to really use it, right? It's
Mm.
not enough for the thing to be functionally good. It has to be very, very aesthetic as well. So I would say if I just put it back together, the four big pillars I encourage young people to embrace: problem solving skills, computational thinking, working in teams, and design thinking.
Another buzzword in the skill industry is passion economy, which is gaining a lot of popularity these days, and the rise of platforms like Upwork and Fiverr, where people can just be part of the part of organization, but not be too much committed to it. And more and more consultants are rising up, and people are less and less preferring to work in a bigger setup, and organizations are becoming smaller every day. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a fantastic question, and I think it's a great point that you're making. I mean, in some sense, the gig economy itself is a building block saying that people are not attached to a particular organization. They're largely freelancers, they're owners of their own time, and they are self managed professionals, right? So that's a starting point. But you're right about the passion economy that, clearly the world is giving a lot of premium to people who are good at something, right? If you're really good at something, I think your education is going to become less important. So if you're a fantastic chef, I think there is a real market for you,
Mm.
right? If you're a fantastic graphic artist, there's a market for you. So in other words, anything that you do really well, there is a potential in today's economy, thanks to these platforms, that you can make yourself available to a global audience, and you can offer your services and skills to a global audience. Now, of course, you need to also have marketing skills, know how to position yourself correctly. All that is not easy either. But having said all that, I think somebody with a fundamental skill set in which they have a great degree of love and passion, you make great jewelry, out of things. And, I mean, I know so many people who are very good at these kinds of things, and they are doing really well. Now, of course, you can also be a programmer and be part of the, sort of gig economy. You can be part of the platforms which offer programming services worldwide. So, in fact, I'll tell a story which is very useful in this to compare. If you look at, our neighboring countries, we go to Bangladesh as an example, and I was there about 5 years ago for some work, and I was shocked to find that the best students in Bangladesh who are graduating in computer science, none of them want to have a job, right? And in a way that has happened because they haven't had the companies like TCS and Microsoft and Infosys coming and knocking on campus doors saying that we want to hire people. So in other words, they never had the opportunity to have campus interviews like we had in India. And
Mm.
because they didn't have the opportunity, they went to the next generation very quickly. Just like in India, we didn't have good landlines and phones, so we went to mobiles very quickly. US has great landlines, they struggled to go to mobile much later than others. So in
Mm.
other words, when you don't have a certain model working for you, like campus recruitment in large numbers, which Bangladesh did not have India's advantage, they didn't have an economy of IT. So what did the students do? They all started becoming graduating and offering themselves on these platforms, digital platforms for global freelancing as programmers. And some of them started making so much money that they all became, freestyle programmers for global, projects. So in other words, and therefore the aspirational aspect of it became that people who are graduating watch these freelancers doing so well and they want to become like that. And somebody comes and offers them a campus interview and says, this is useless, I don't want to do this, right? So in other words, I think there is certainly going to be a huge advantage to the passion economy, to the idea that we are all part of a global gig platform and we have all skill sets. But even for that, I would say that you have to really be well prepared. I mean, it's not enough to have a skill. You need to how to present your work, how to productize your offering, how to charge for it, how to have customer conversations. Because if you want to get low end rates, it's one thing. But if you want to really become a professional, you really have to learn how to present yourself. It's like YouTube, right? Anybody can put up a YouTube, but the real YouTubers who are fantastic at their work are at a different level altogether, right? So passion, in my view, is necessary, but not enough. You need to also have to acquire the skill sets required to become a freelancer who's presenting himself or herself to a global market.
Now, we'd love to know a bit about your entrepreneurial journey. Can you tell us, to start with, can you tell us what are the different challenges that you have faced so far during your long entrepreneurial journey?
Well, it's been more than 12, 13 years now. So clearly the journey's had many, many different twists and turns and ups and downs and turning points. So I would say that, entrepreneurship by definition is a very interesting choice. And of course, I encourage everybody who has a desire to be an entrepreneur to make that choice. It's not an easy choice to make, right? Especially if you come from a family which doesn't have a lot of financial additional wealth, it may be hard for you to make those choices because you are also a breadwinner. You're not just somebody who's coming in, sort of trying to things out. So I understand the social context in which people may or may not be able to make those choices. But having said that, I think the beauty of being an entrepreneur is that it's fundamentally a very, very, I call it the irrational, rational choice, right? What does that mean? It's like, when if you're like on a weekend, you're watching TV and you're watching a sports channel and they're showing these mountaineers climbing Mount Everest or something. If you really think about it, is climbing Mount Everest a sensible idea? It's not. It's actually a pretty dangerous idea. It's a pretty stupid idea. The odds of not coming back are fairly high.
Yep.
But yet people do that. So therefore, the first and foremost realization is that the closest thing I can think of to entrepreneurship is an adventure sport, right? If you have an adventure sport, it gives you a thrill. You have a great excitement in doing it, but the danger is always lurking around the corner.
Mm.
Right now, what is the nature of this danger? The danger is also is not really a danger in the traditional sense. And I'd like to quote one of my friends, who is very well known entrepreneur himself, Sudhir. He'd said once that there is uncertainty in entrepreneurship, but there may not be too much risk in it. Now, what is the difference between uncertainty and risk? When you start a company, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to earn enough from your product. Does your product have good product market fit? It may not. For example, post-pandemic, which completely threw everyone by surprise, a lot of businesses which are very sensible businesses completely disappeared because they had no digital solution or story after pandemic.
Mm.
A lot of businesses which were like doing nothing are struggling along, suddenly boomed because of the pandemic. So in other words, uncertainty will determine a lot of your reality. So if you're a person for whom uncertainty is comfortable, you are a natural entrepreneur. If for you uncertainty is very nerve wracking, like you want to know exactly what will happen tomorrow, day after, the year after, and everything for you is a good organized plan. And by the way, I certainly think planning is a great skill and important skill. But if you cannot live with your plan kind of getting toppled time and time again, entrepreneurship can become very painful. Uncertainty can become very painful. Now, in terms of risk, there is not much risk because today's day and age, if you are a well-educated person coming out of a good college with a good degree, if you try entrepreneurship, you have a pretty decent 20-30% chance of making it to some decent level. And if you don't have it, so be it. It's a very valuable skill. And when you go out to the job market after that and you say, you know what, I'm going to basically talk about my learnings and what I've learned from this. I think today, unlike 10 years ago, when being an entrepreneur and seemed to be not successful was a bit of a black spot, I think that has completely gone. Today, people love people who have gone through entrepreneurial experience. Even in TalentSprint, when I interview two people for the same job, if somebody, they have the same skills, but one has gone through an entrepreneurial experience and struggled through it, I will always give them a priority because I know they understand what it takes to make a business tick. So I would say that my journey in that sense, now to come to your real question, the journey has been phenomenal. They have been struggles with product market fit. I mean, sometimes we have had coding boot camps, some products in coding boot camps struggle for years and suddenly it catches fire and becomes huge, like our partnership with Google, right? Women Engineers Program. It took me a long time to bake it. It took us like 4 or 5 years of constant investment with not much return. And we were about to say that, why are we doing this women engineers coding bootcamp? It doesn't work because beyond the point, no one's funding it and students don't have the money to pay for it. And suddenly Google comes along and says, we'll adopt and scale this massive. So sometimes patience is important. You can sometimes you can give up too early. That's a risk. We have done that. In some areas, we have stretched for very long and realized it's not going to work. But all things said and done, I would say that, it's fun to be an entrepreneur because the adventure sport analogy will always work. It's thrilling, it's exciting, it's uncertain, and sometimes dangerous.
Speaking of product market fitment, can you tell us or can you give us some examples on how did you go about achieving product market fit, and when sometimes you don't achieve the product market fit, and when that happens, you pivot your business model. So if you can
Yeah.
also share some examples of pivoting the business model.
Oh, I think the core of it is exactly the entire story of TalentSprint is a story of at least two or three major pivots. So, for example, when we started the coding bootcamp, everybody told us what a fantastic idea and what a great product, and industry loves it because they can hire trained programmers and not have to spend time investing in them. So people are recruiting love it. Society loves it. They say, what a great thing you're doing. Your business is not only actually, a real good business, it's also socially impactful. You're doing such good work for society. You're helping young people find better jobs. Colleges love it because the students get outcomes. But then you realize the core problem remains that in many times you don't realize that need is not the same as demand. Need is a problem exists and needs a solution. Demand is somebody's going to pay to solve that problem, right? Now, you may solve a problem that is worth solving, but there might still be a situation where nobody wants to pay for it. For example, in the case of coding boot camps, because it aims at young people who are in college graduating and they come from often non-affluent, non-privileged backgrounds, they don't have too much money, nor do their parents. So the surplus money required for them to get this really outstanding education, if you spend like 5 lakh or 10 lakh on your college degree, finding another 1 lakh rupee to get this real one thing that gives you all the differentiation is often hard.
Hmm.
So we realized after a point that coding bootcamps work up to a point in terms of impact and results, but you can't ever become a huge company doing that. So we started thinking that what have we learned from this business that we can apply to an adjacent space? And that is when we entered working professionals. So the moment you go to working professionals and make coding bootcamps turn into high-end, deep tech coding bootcamps, and then you realize that this entire working professionals have money, they have been earning salaries, but the market around them has changed and they are feeling very uncertain about their future. So all of a sudden realize that, all of these people also need a boot camp, not
Hmm.
to start their career, but to restart their career or reboot their careers. So then we realize that here is the same audience with a different set of need, but they have actually money to pay for the solution and we have to just change the solution for their problem. So in other words, we realize that, and this is the classic story of entrepreneurship, that ultimately, if you look back over a period of time and say what worked, it's a series of experiments that you do, some of which work, some of which don't. And the ones that work, you scale up. And as you try to scale it up, you realize that there's a bigger market for it, and then you become successful, right? So it's the important thing is to keep trying. Product market fit, you have to like try quickly, get results, get data, learn, scale, or step back, reinvest, redirect yourself. And that's what I also mean by uncertainty. When you launch a product, despite all your market research, you never know whether it's going to work. Sometimes it exceeds your expectations. That happens about 1 in 5 times. 3 out of 5 times it falls below your expectations because you haven't figured out how the market will respond. So the market has its own logic. And that logic is sometimes very hard to decipher ahead of time.
Speaking of experiments, every time you run an experiment, you either fail or you succeed, but every time you learn. Uh, so this is my final question for you. Tell us about the different learnings you have got as an entrepreneur, which we can take away and apply to our ventures.
Sure. Now, I'll give you an example of this through a very concrete thing. And there are many learnings, but I'll just, in the interest of time, I'll give you one important learning, right? There is a famous book called Good to Great by Jim Collins. It's a very classic book, and I encourage all your readers who haven't read it to try it out. It's a really great book on leadership, right? How companies are built, how organizations are built. I think one of the major insights of the book, which I think is often greatly underestimated, is that it's the example he gives is like you're a driver of a bus. Let's say you're the entrepreneur. You have a bus, you are a driver, you're sitting in a driver's seat, you're waiting for passengers to come on board. Now, there are two ways to look at this problem in an entrepreneurial setting. One is to say, I know as a bus driver that I'm currently parked in, point A, and I'm going to drive this bus to point B, and I'm looking for passengers who will come into the bus to go to point B. The typical bus, right? It has a route. But what Jim Collins finds after his research is that that is not the way a good entrepreneurship exercise actually goes. That's not how a good company is built. In fact, the driver of that bus is standing in point A without full knowledge of where he or she wants to go. But what they're looking for is the right kind of passenger. Who is entering the bus? If I get the right set of people into the bus, as my team, my colleagues, my partners, my business partners, if my team bus is full of people who are like-minded, who have an excitement of this kind of a journey. Once you get the right people into the bus, then you can together decide where you want to go. Right? So difference between somebody who says, I know where I want to go, I want to find people, that's like recruiting, right? But on the other hand, a good entrepreneur should say, you know what, let me find the right set of people that we can work together. Of course, we have a broad idea. We know what generally we work on, but don't try to be over prescriptive. First, get the right team in place, work with them, and then through that journey, you will discover what is the right place to go. So that's really my lesson. My biggest lesson is that I'm a huge believer in creating world-class teams, high-performance teams. And if you look at TalentSprint, and we have some of the best people in the world working here. And it's all because of this mentality that everybody has a voice, everybody has autonomy, and we like to do things together as a collective. So that's my lesson as an entrepreneur.
Well, I would say it was a pleasure and absolute honor to host you here at ELI. Thanks for your time, Dr. Santanu, and our best wishes
Thank you
for
so much, Priya. Thank you so much, Priya. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity. Bye-bye.